things is, if we don't have a big enough havingness, then we're not going to have much. Those who have not, ask not. So the bigger our havingness, the more things we have in life. The other story is something we all confront most times, even coming in to service today. Rode by a guy who was sitting on the side of the road. Clearly he would like to have someone stop and maybe make a contribution to a situation. This is a story of a blind man who had a little tablet, and the tablet said, anything helps. And sometimes I'm going home and I drive by certain places, and there's someone with a little sign saying, anything helps. Clearly they want a donation. But someone else walked up to that person, took the sign, turned it over, and wrote, have a nice day. You know, that person's contributions increased threefold just by saying have a nice day rather than anything helps. So it's almost like when we're praising people in some ways, speaking to their higher angels, we get more than when we just, anything helps, so to speak. So, and that's all totally based on how we want to communicate who we are and how other people are. Now, without the Holy Spirit, this gets into another aspect of the inner life. Without the Holy Spirit, Christianity becomes just religion. When there's no Holy Spirit there, Christianity just becomes religion. Because the Holy Spirit is kind of often omitted in traditional religions, because we talk about the cause, we talk about the conscious mind, and we talk about the material world. But what goes on in the creative mind is often important. We call the Holy Spirit, we call it the subconscious, we call it the unconscious. There are many names for it. In our philosophy, we call it the creative mind. But when that's sort of excluded, we sort of shortchange ourselves and we become more just a religion. And what we end up doing is putting things in terms of strictly mind and matter. In fact, one of my teachers once said that one of the ways you can tell what religion someone's from is to ask them, what is the relationship between mind and matter? In a more conventional sense, people will say mind and matter, they're sort of connected, but they're in two different worlds, mind and matter. Mm-hmm. In our philosophy, we say mind becomes matter, matter becomes mind. In Christian Science, they say mind and matter, there's no difference. They're exactly the same thing. Well, we make a little distinction, but we definitely have a connection between them. Now, what religious people say generally is that we have a body and we have a soul. And you can say, well, that's true, we have a body and we have a soul. What mysticism will say is that we are a soul who happens to have a body. A little distinction makes all the difference in the world.
Yes.
Now, the story of Jesus and the Easter story, this is where it gets into the inner story, a little more into the inner story. Jesus, his whole life was foretold by the prophet Isaiah 700 years before he came along. He said there will be a virgin who will give birth to someone named Emmanuel. God will be with us. That was said 700 years before Jesus ever showed up. And before Joseph really even got married to Mary, what happened? An angel came, got Mary pregnant. And Joseph found out, he says, oh, I think I'm going to leave her. I just can't deal with this. Well, the angel came to Joseph in a dream and said, this is a holy child, and this child is going to save humanity. And this is going to be the Messiah. So not marry, because this is really the right thing to do. I know you weren't the father, it's not your seed, but it's going to become, you're going to participate and play a big role in all of humanity. So Joseph kind of sucked it up and said, okay, maybe I still get married. And then as the story goes on, and Jesus wasn't with us a long time, we had this whole thing of his whole life and everything that happened to him was foretold. He knew he was going to be crucified. He knew he was going to be put on a cross. He knew he was going to rise from the dead. And at the same time, one of the things that comes out of the whole Easter story is that's his humanity, is that this was not an easy thing for him to do. This was tough. He didn't want to be crucified. He didn't want to go through that. But, it was God's will, and he did end up going through it. And so in order to even get that information, he had to be open to what was God's idea for his life. What did God want for him? And as the story goes, not really the story, but his whole life goes, is he does have a teaching. And his central teaching, if you boil all of the teachings that Jesus had down to one thing, the central teaching is that the kingdom of heaven is at hand. The kingdom of heaven is at hand, but it's not of this world. It's at hand. It's all around us. Most of us don't see it. It's not of this world. And somehow some of the people thought he was coming to get knives and guns and swords, and not guns, they didn't have them in those days, but to basically do battle. He said, no, I'm not doing that kind of battle. Now, what's very, I don't want to say it's interesting, it's just that I don't know that it would happen quite in this day and age unless it was mob mentality. But there were sort of three sacred events that happened, boom, 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 within a very short span of time. First, it was Palm Sunday. We got to experience that with the palm trees on the wall. And that's when he really upset the establishment and overturned the tables because these people were making a business out of the synagogue. And so he turned the tables upside down and said, my Father's house is not supposed to be a den of thieves. And that, according to many scholars, said that's the reason he had to go. That's the reason he got crucified. Well, this happened on a Sunday, what we call Palm Sunday. Good Friday, not even just 5 days away. Guess what happened? Just a mere 5 days away, 4.5 days away. He's crucified. He's crucified, and a couple of days later, what happened? He rose from the dead. So to this day, we celebrate the resurrected Christ. So Easter Sunday is really a celebration of Resurrection Day. But within that short space of time, he upset the apple cart, upset the establishment. The establishment got pissed off, and they crucified him, but that didn't stop his life. He rose from the dead. And so Easter, not ever since then, but not long after then, we've been celebrating it, and we celebrate it to this day. It's really a celebration of the resurrection, of the day of resurrection. So all these butterflies are symbols of transformation. They go through what they go through, and they're symbols of resurrection. We don't call it that, or transformation, basically the same thing. But that's what happened. He died in order for us to get an example that he conquered death, and we can be resurrected as well. So Easter is kind of an interesting word. In Hebrew, the actual word Easter is called Peshat. Peshat is what the Hebrew meaning of the Hebrew word for Easter. And Easter itself never appears in the Bible. You won't find the word Easter in the Bible at all, but we do celebrate it. The meaning of Easter is simply spring, which means a new beginning or renewal. That's what Easter means. You look it up. Some of the polytheistic religions actually did use the name Easter, but they had a little different orientation, although everybody calls it spring, a new beginning on some level. We just have a special way of looking at it, because if someone dies, some people think that's the end. There's no getting around that. But that's really only the beginning of a new chapter in our lives. So we come to what I opened with, and that is how do we identify ourselves with what we want? And what's important here is, why do we want what we want? Why do we want what we want? Okay, what do you want? Okay. Why do you want that? And the follow-up question is, where is that want coming from? Is it coming from your personality? Is it coming from your soul? You pretty much want anything you want, but certain wants have a higher calling than certain other wants. So it's almost like what we really want on the highest level is to rediscover the power within us. And how do we rediscover that power? We discover it through visioning. We discover it through intuition. We discover it through picking up on multi-sensory perceptions, however those might come to us. Listening to the calling by asking God, what would you like, God? What is your idea for me? There's another way to approach getting to the same place. Reverend Carolyn kind of touched on it last time, and that is to align yourself with the order and the patterns of the universe. Just be in alignment with what the universe is. Look at what's going on and go with the flow of what is going on. And if we do those two things, we listen to what God has to say for us, we listen to God's will, we try to follow the vision, we seek the vision in many, many, many different ways, and we align ourselves with the patterns of the universe. Maybe we just do one or the other, but either one put us there. If we do both, we're that much further along. So what does it mean to align yourself with the patterns and the order of the universe? Well, kind of like the plants. It's a certain season for planting, a certain season not for planting. For us, it's a certain time for doing certain things in your life, and a certain time for maybe getting over certain things in your life. But, so following the patterns, it could mean listening to what the stars say about your life, or what your name says about your life, or any other patterns in the universe that are universal. They are there for us to look at. As long as we can align ourselves with them, we're all the better for it. But what it makes us is an authentic person, because we're really expressing who we are. Who we are is a soul that happens to have a body that can express that soul. And as some people say, it's learning to stay in your lane. Know what your calling is, know what your good is, and stay in your lane. Doesn't mean 100% all the time, but in general, go with what you know, go with what works, and know that God is always good. God does it, it's always good. That's the bottom line. Now, we are, not only do we want to identify ourselves with what we want, but this is tough for some people, we have to be responsible for what we create, and be responsible for the lives we create, our life, and for the lives we create. So how do we be responsible for that? We create something and some of us take no responsibility. I did that today. I'm out of here. Well, one way of being responsible for your life is to use the power of God. The power of God is also the power of good. And we can do that through prayer and through visualization, and it's basically using the conscious mind. That's part of the inner power, or the inner power of God, is to be able to go in a place of prayer and go into your conscious mind, go into visualization, and you can use the power of good to further your life. In fact, Ernest Holmes used to say that in the beginning, that especially applies to beginners in science of mind. There is a power for good in this world, and you can use it. We can also serve the power for good. This requires another inner part of the mind, and that is through visioning. Through visioning, we go to the creative mind and we simply ask the question, what is God's idea for this, or this? And so through visioning, if we're listening, we begin to hear what God says. I once heard Wayne Dyer say, with someone who asked him a question about praying, he just said, have you ever thought to just stop and listen? And the person, no, I just was into prayer, not listening to what God had to say. Now, sometimes, certainly in my life, I'm sure it's true in your life, before I got to Science of Mind, I didn't know about prayer, really the power of prayer. I'd do it, but I didn't really have a real good concept of it. I certainly didn't have a concept of visioning. But there is something you can do, and Louise Hay says you can do this. You can change your life by changing your thinking. And I took that to mean by just looking at the conditions of your life. If you want to change the condition of your life, think about what you want to change and begin to change those conditions. And simply, even if you don't pray or you don't go within, I think of something like even the Pope has said, for those who don't know how to pray, just wish me well. Okay, so for those who don't know how to pray or don't know how to do visioning, just look at your life and make changes that are appropriate. Let me give an example. Years ago, going back to 17, I just got out of high school and I signed up for the military. I signed up for the Navy because they had a draft. I didn't really want to go in the Army. I thought by going to the Navy it'd be a better deal for me. So I signed up. And right out of high school. And 4 years later, I couldn't get any more deferments. I didn't graduate from college yet. It was 4 years later. Had to go active duty. So I went active duty in the Philippines. Spent my time over there, almost, not quite 2 years, but about 16, 17 months. Came back, and what happened in that process is very interesting from a personal viewpoint. It helped me to change my thinking just by looking at how all the order was. I learned how to make a bed perfectly. I knew how to shine my shoes perfectly and to organize my life perfectly. I didn't plan on learning that, but that's one of the things that came out of it. When I went in the military, I was a C+ student. When I got out of the military, I was an A student. So it really turned me around. It turned me around. I had no intention of getting a graduate degree, but after going into the military, I said, I'm smarter than I think. Why not get as much of a degree as I can? So I kept going to school more. So that was just an example of where I changed by looking at the conditions of my life, I simply changed it to match what I needed to have happen. So we can better ourselves in many ways. It's kind of like the Pope says, if you can't pray, just wish me well, which is a good thing.
Yes.
Now, I want to bring this to a close with not a story, an actual quote from Ernest Holmes. And here's what it says. Being a victim, blaming and shaming do nothing to change things. Anything that will enable you to express greater life, greater happiness, or power, so long as it don't harm anybody else, must be the will of God. I was having this discussion with someone, I said, well, how do I know what the will of God is? Well, if it's good for you and it's good for everybody else and it doesn't harm anyone, that's the will of God. Oh, okay. So, as much as you can conceive in your life, and this is true for everybody, as much as we can conceive, that will become a part of our experience, kind of like the two fishermen. We have a small frying pan, we're just going to get small things. But if we have the big frying pan, we'll get as much in our lives as we want. So with that, let me invite you to go within for a moment of treatment prayer.